Welcome to another episode of Thoughts from the Big Chair, and I'm delighted to be joined by somebody who I've worked with for a little while and had the pleasure of knowing during Thomson Reuters, Shanker Ramamurthy. Hi, Shanker.
Hey, Russell. It's a delight to join you today on this podcast.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for joining. And maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the experiences you've had recently, particularly at IBM.
Sure. So my current job is I'm the global managing partner in IBM Consulting for our banking consulting practice. I call it my day job. My night job is I'm the president of the IBM Industry Academy, which is the thought leadership arm in IBM, across IBM, on the impact of technology on industries and associated business models. And I love my day job, and my night job is equally interesting, given that exponential technology is changing the business model in every industry, including banking. It's an exciting time to be doing what I'm doing as part of IBM.
Yeah, and when we last spoke, we were talking about the strategic questions that the board should be asking when considering elements of digital adoption or transformation. So maybe we could start there and just give us some views as to how you advise or how you think about technology transformation from a strategy perspective, and what are the key questions that you start with when you're going through a process like that?
It's a great question, Russell. So maybe before I go into the questions, maybe it's worth sharing my perspective of what's happening as a result of the combination of exponential technologies. I've been working in consulting and financial services, and the intersection of financial services and strategy and technology for over 25 years now. When I started, and I've been lucky enough to work in all the 6 continents and over 50 countries in that time, doing a variety of things. When I started my career, the question was always around business strategy, and given the business strategy, how can we use technology to help achieve that business strategy? When I talk technology, I'm really talking digital technology. Now, in today's world and going into tomorrow, the impact of exponential technology is very visible in every industry, admittedly more so in industries that are inherently digital, such as financial services. But truthfully, no industry, no analog industry is immune to the impact of combination of these exponential technologies. And therefore, increasingly, it's not about creating a business strategy in isolation and then figuring out, now, how do I apply technology to my strategy? It's increasingly becoming an ambidextrous need for CEOs and the boards. On the one hand, business strategy is important, and technology enables achieving the business strategy. But equally importantly, increasingly, technology strategy and capabilities are driving business strategy, because they're both creating traditional and increasingly non-traditional competitors. And technology capabilities are enabling enterprises to refine their business strategies, or rethink about their business strategies to take advantage of what's possible. So with that backdrop, I'd simply ask myself 3 fundamental questions if I was in the boardroom in almost any industry. Given the impact of exponential technologies, is my strategy ambitious enough? And the associated question would be, and am I moving fast enough, particularly if I'm an incumbent? Am I moving fast enough? And then the third question I'd be asking myself is, do I have the people and the organizational capabilities to execute, given the extraordinary rate and pace at which exponential technologies is changing everything. I mean, those would be three simple fundamental questions I'd be asking myself.
And what is typically the response when you enter into discussions with your clients about those three questions?
Almost to a management team and a board, the first question of is my strategy ambitious enough? If it's an incumbent, they tend to say, maybe we should be doing more from a strategy standpoint, and maybe we should be more ambitious given the challenge, particularly from the disruptors. And almost to a management team, the response to the second question is, we're not executing fast enough. We need to do more in a shorter period of time, and we need to accelerate what we are doing. And the response to the third question is almost always, we recognize we can't do it by ourselves. We got to figure out how to leverage the ecosystem and leverage the capabilities that are outside our organizational boundaries, couple them with what we have to go ahead and execute to achieve the outcomes. Collaboration and ecosystems are themes that I'm increasingly hearing in every industry, but certainly so in financial services.
And what are the examples that you've seen in financial services where you mentioned incumbents and perhaps more disruptive business models in the financial services? Maybe some compare and contrast to be interesting in the financial sectors. You've seen some early stage companies grapple with it and more incumbents grapple with some of the adoption of these new technologies.
Yeah, indeed. I tend to say much of the future of financial services in terms of business models is really being written in Asia Pac for a variety of reasons, including the impact of these, you can either call them disruptors, or you can call them tech fins, or you can call them super apps. There's a variety of terms that people use, but if you kind of roll back the clock and look at the impact of, say, the Alibabas, the Alipay, the Ant, Tencent, and Grab and Gojek and so on the financial services landscape in Asia Pacific over the last 5 or 6 years, they've grown at an extraordinary rate and pace, and as disruptors have forced the incumbents to rethink their business model. And the incumbents have actually done a lot of work to position themselves in this era of super apps, in an Asia Pacific context. So if we look at incumbents like DBS in Singapore or State Bank of India and several others, they have radically and dramatically re-engineered their business models to thrive in this era of super apps. And what do I mean by that? If as an incumbent, historically 70 to 80% of your focus has been on the middle and back office. So if you look at it as a kind of a pyramid, the front office and things you do around the customers are a relatively small part of what you've done because of the huge legacy complexity and the regulatory complexity you had to deal with in the middle and back office. The amount of discretionary spend on the front office has been minimal. But what these institutions are now doing is they're really flipping that pyramid on its head, with the middle and back office getting materially automated, and financial institutions taking the mindset of, hey, I'm not taking what was an analog process and seeing how much more automation I can do. I start back office to really designing for no operations. And then when it comes to the front office, I focus not just on what I've been historically doing, but I'm extending the value chain, much further into the customer journeys. So rather than waiting for a customer to come to me for a mortgage, because as customers think about buying a home, the first thing they think about is not a mortgage. The first thing they think about is, where am I going to buy a place? Which real estate agent, a broker, or intermediary should I work through? And I'm going to make all those decisions and later on go and look at a mortgage. Well, banks like DBS have enabled that to happen through their banking ecosystem, through their portal, through the ecosystem they built out. Same thing, for example, with banks like State Bank of India, a traditional large Indian bank, and they have now created an application called Yono. You only need one, and IBM has been integral to that journey. And pretty much everything that a customer needs is on the app. And by the way, if you're a customer of State Bank of India and you're interested in travel or hotel reservations or other e-commerce things, you can get a much better deal by going through the Yono app than you can by directly going to an e-commerce provider. And that changes the nature of the relationship that a financial institution has with its customer. And an amazing story in terms of the impact it's had for State Bank of India in terms of the cohort of customers they're now able to attract, and the density and the richness of the relationship they're able to build, as an example.
Yeah, that's a great example. And the going back to the point you were mentioning earlier around where banks are starting to look at new areas, even if you're an incumbent in a large bank, you don't try and make your back office more efficient necessarily. You pick areas where you can outsource to take the more homogeneous areas and outsource those and spend the brain power on more innovative areas.
Indeed. And different markets, different challenges. In Asia Pac, because the mobile revolution, both on the back of the mobile revolution and the imposition of some standards by various countries, for example, the universal payment interface in India and so on. Tens, hundreds of millions of people got into the financial services ecosystem in the last few years on the back of mobile and on the back of standards governments were imposing, and those customers directly were jumping into the digital era, while in mature markets like North America and Europe, the number of people outside of the banking ecosystem are relatively small. But even here, you see the extraordinary growth of the likes of say PayPal and Square and Stripe and other providers, and how rapidly they've gotten into digital wallets and money movement and so on. We're seeing incumbents kind of respond to that challenge by doing a lot of creative things. And that's the world we are in. The disruptors are forcing incumbents to react faster and create new capability. And it's from a customer standpoint, it's all goodness. It's encouraging innovation and driving greater value and greater ease for consumers and small and medium enterprises.
Yeah, it comes back to some of your three questions in a way, which is if you go back to the first question, which is, is your strategy bold enough? And the second one, which is, are you executing fast enough and being agile? If you're trying to do everything simultaneously, then clearly that's the challenge. And being able to pick out your North Star and see which are the areas that are going to differentiate you in the market over time, then that's where it comes to that real strategic question about where you put your effort, because you can be very busy on areas of digital transformation, but unless you're picking the sweet spot, then very quickly your strategy starts to get unpicked.
You're exactly right. And in fact, over the last couple of decades, a lot of the work we've been doing has been on the point you're on, Russell, which is, no enterprise needs to do everything to everybody front to back, all within their enterprise boundaries, because of the rise of what we call complements, right? With digitization and standardization, there are a lot of choices available, and you can easily plug and play and mix and match. And it's important for every enterprise to really understand what is core to their brand promise and what's context. So, two or three competitors might be doing the same, might be in the same space, but the strategies they adopt and therefore the business models that they adopt might be entirely different. And we are seeing a lot of that in every industry, including financial services. So the shape and design of business models, even for players, even for incumbents within a single industry, is radically changing because of the rise of complements, all driven through exponential technology and digitization. So one of the things we've been doing, and I'm on the board of an organization called BION, Banking Industry Architecture Network. It's a .org. And for the banking ecosystem, we've been working, and it's about 70 or 80 enterprises, a lot of financial institutions, some of the largest ones in the world, plus providers, ISVs and service providers to the ecosystem. And it's all about standardizing the building blocks of capability for a typical bank, so that through combination of ISVs and microservices and APIs, we are able to bring us capabilities that institutions can easily adopt through plug and play capabilities to accelerate innovation. A lot of interesting work being done in that space today.
Now, and that's fascinating. I mean, when you and I spoke a while back, we were talking about foundational, secondary, and tertiary levels of technology. Maybe tell us a bit more about that, because then that'll lead us and springboard us into what's now termed exponential technology, and you've mentioned that a few times. So maybe we'll start with those three and then get into exponential technologies.
Yeah, I mean, so foundational technologies are, and by the way, whether it's foundational or secondary, tertiary, there's a combination of digital technologies that are kind of fundamentally all growing at an incredible rate and pace. And clearly, we've talked about Moore's law in the past, but whether it be machine learning or cloud or compute capability, those you could think of as kind of foundational capabilities. But then there is a whole bunch of second order technologies on top of that, such as the ones we are seeing, that leverages these to create second order technologies. And that could be that's different in different industries, but everything we are seeing in terms of platform based business models, in terms of leveraging that into drones and 3D printing and all the things we are seeing in healthcare and other industries and fundamental research, they're all kind of building on those foundational capabilities. And and it's not that these are discrete things, they're kind of interacting with each other. 4G and 5G telco capability couples with everything we are seeing in platform models and the implications of that, whether it be in the automotive industry or the telecommunication industry or other historically analog industries, is extraordinarily compelling. I mean, going back all the way to Isaac Newton, where he said, if I can see far into the future, that's because I'm standing on the shoulder of giants. What's happening to every industry and every enterprise is they're standing on the shoulders of giants, but each of those giants are kind of scaling exponentially. And when you have the interplay of multiple exponential technologies, the ability to innovate accelerates at a breathtaking pace, only constrained by our imagination and by our ability to consume the extraordinary range of options available for us. And that's what we are seeing in every industry today.
Where do you think we talked before, and a lot of the podcasts we've had have touched on software as a service, and everything seems to be moving to as a service of one form or another at the moment. Do you feel as though that trend's just going to continue?
Oh, very much so. And the reason that that trend is going to continue is once something is available as a service, particularly in a software context, then the ability to mix and match becomes dramatically simplified. And the more we operate in a global economy, in a global digital economy, and in a platform-based economy, the more the rise of as a service models. And in fact, I'm reminded of a very interesting quote from way back. You know, Society moves into the future, creates the future by enabling us to do more and more things automatically. I would almost say it's not just automatically; it's almost automagically. And if you have the power of a smartphone on your hands, the ability to um, um, digitize the analog world and have it available to us as a service that automatically updates itself and provides you more and more for less and less. All of us are kind of seeing that day to day in all the apps that we download and use. So you buy yourself a smartphone, you might spend a few $100s buying the device, but the consumer surplus that it creates are in the tens of thousands of dollars, because look at the number of analog things that have been digitized and are available to us as a service. In fact, the very fact that we are now communicating with each other on a Zoom call is one example of that. But there are hundreds of such examples of the real world getting digitized. No need for a camera, no need for a video camera, no need for books, no need for maps, no need for various music systems, and on and on and on. That's the power of an as a service model. And the more it touches the real world, the era of more and more analog things getting digitized and then available as a service, therefore moving us into a world where we need to own a fewer number of things and we're able to tap into it as a service, is really the world we are moving into. A very exciting world to be in, because effectively what that means is um, assets are being sweated much more, being able to be used much more, whether it be instead of hotel rooms, whether it be Airbnb, or increasingly in time, rather than own an automobile, have access to an automobile when you need it. I mean, that's the world we're moving into in the as a service world, and exciting world that is.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that engines as a service with Rolls-Royce. So the mind and the applications in industry go far and wide.
Indeed, indeed. And even the most basic things as a service, like you think about companies like Twilio and Calera and so on, that are really providing kind of fundamental as a service capabilities that enables large enterprises to provide, much of the telco backend to enable us to reach in and provide services around the world without developers having to, in large enterprises, having to spend several months building out a relationship with the telcos and building software to enable a service around the world. The likes of Twilio are able to get to multi-billion-dollar valuations and provide that service in a very specialized area, simply because they are providing an as a service capability that millions of developers around the world are able to tap into. And this is the power of the rise of complements, and this is the power of microservices and API based as a service offerings that are dramatically increasing the rate and pace of innovation.
Yeah. Now, I'm just conscious of time, so I'm going to try and do a quick question at the end, but perhaps one that a lot of people will be really interested about. So I saw that IBM put out some news in the last day or so about the fact that it's recognizing the skill crisis in the tech industry, and has announced that it will help recruit and train over 30 million people by the end of 2030. So clearly a big focus of IBM. I'm sure you mentor and coach a lot of people in the tech world. How do you, if you're an aspiring exec now, trying to climb the corporate ladder, and obviously nobody can do that these days without a reasonable understanding of technology in one form or another. What are the 2 or 3 tips you give somebody to focus on and say, try and grapple with all of these different technologies? It really goes to your third point around, do you have the people and the talent? How do you build that talent and the ecosystem?
Great question. And by the way, one of the joys of working for IBM is the broad societal impact that we're able to have, and it's a 100-year-old company that's created and thrived through multiple disruptive eras of technology, and continuously invents the next generation of technology and reinvents itself to be extremely relevant to clients and society at large. And our chairman and CEO Arvind Krishna's commitment now, to your point, bring another 30 million people into the digital era and train them and have them ready to on the one hand create more value for society, on the other hand become more valuable themselves and have enriched careers, is one of many such examples of IBM being at the forefront. Now, so I tell everyone that I mentor, if you want to be relevant today and tomorrow, you got to either really be a technologist, and not everyone's going to be a technologist, or importantly, understand how technology is going to change your role, your job, your company, your industry, and figure out how to be a smart user of technology. So you're either doing one or the other. If you're not doing either, then you're going to be working for someone, that's on a good day, working for someone who's been doing one of those 2 former things, or on a bad day, you find yourself being replaced by new models, by new capabilities, by new companies, and your skill set atrophies at a rate and pace that it's hard to comprehend. It's kind of the Red Queen hypothesis, right? Going back to Lewis Carroll, you got to run hard to stay at the same place. Guess what? If you're not really taking advantage of technology, you got to run harder and harder to stay at the same spot, because exponential change is the order of the day. I tend to tell both my clients and people that I mentor, we're going to see more change in the next decade than the last 3 decades. And the decade after that, you're going to see more change the last 100 years, because with exponential technology, recognize that every 18 months or so, what the power of what technology can do doubles. In an analog world, if you walk, you walk a meter with every step. In 30 steps, you walk, 30 meters. In an exponential world where your stride can double with every step, 2 to the power 30 is a billion. That means your 31st step is going to be longer than to the moon and back. And that's the world we live in. And we ought to really internalize the impact of that, because the human brain is really designed, evolution has designed us for an analog world, while exponential technology is changing the analog world exponentially. Exciting times for those of us who are willing to wrap our head around how digital technology is creating these extraordinary capabilities and a societal surplus. And it's on all of us to figure out how to take advantage of that, both individually, but also in a societal context, to drive more value for all of us.
Yeah, more singularity. Brilliant. Well, listen, Shanker, thanks so much for sharing everything that you've covered. I think we've covered an amazing amount of territory in 30 minutes, which is always the ambition on Thoughts on the Big Chair. So thank you once again for taking the time to share your perspectives.
My pleasure, Russell. Onward. Great talking with you. Cheers.
All right, take care.